Is the Caroma K1 the perfect electric scooter for under $500? That's what we're going to find out in today's video. The Caroma K1 has several features that make it special at this price point. These include a 560 watt peak motor, a 15-mile range, and dual seating. So in today's review, I'm going to talk about the unboxing and assembly process, the key specifications and performance, the design features and comfort, the safety and technology features, the riding experience, the pros and cons, and my final verdict. So first of all, with the unboxing, I found the process to be rather easy. Compared to an e-bike, this scooter was easier to put together, and it came about 90% assembled. So the assembly process, it took me about 45 minutes total with the unboxing and following the instructions just to make sure I was doing it properly. And my first impressions of this scooter when putting it together were that it felt quite solid. There's definitely a lot of metal to the frame, and it does weigh about 65 pounds. And as far as the design and aesthetics, I like the color, I like how clean it looks. It's very streamlined and trim looking, and some of the design features we're going to talk about in a moment, some of them are really nice and better than I expected. So as far as key specifications, the K1 does have a 350 watt motor, and that motor peaks at 560 watts of power. So when you're going up a hill, that extra power is very helpful, and it really makes a difference. The K1 does have a top speed of 20 miles per hour, and I have hit that top speed before, and it actually feels very fast on this scooter, but it is very nice because you can get around quickly at that top speed. And one of the things that I really wanted to test with this scooter was how good is it at climbing hills. So the official specs are it's estimated this can climb about a 10 to 15 degree angle, and that's very common with this type of motor. But based on that motor power, I found I was able to climb up to an 18 to 20% grade, and I probably could have climbed a little bit steeper grade. What I found was the K1's hill climbing capabilities were very good on a hard surface. If you're on blacktop, concrete, and even some gravel surfaces, this should be able to easily get that 15 to 20 degree grade max. But I also tested it on grass and surfaces like this in the woods because I like to go above and beyond in my testing. And as someone who does a lot of stuff outdoors, I like to see how well something like this does on a surface where maybe it's not at its best. I did find that it did well on grass in the uphills, but you could not go at quite as steep of a grade. And part of that related to the traction. So I don't think it's necessarily a limitation of the motor, but these tires here, they don't necessarily have a lot of grippiness where they're designed for grass. They're of course designed for more of an urban area and more of those hard surfaces like asphalt and concrete. But even on the grass with myself and one of my children on it, we were able to get up a hill. It was a little bit slower. It of course was not at that peak 20 mile per hour speed, but we were able to get up the hill. And then my wife riding this up the hill, she was able to get up the hill even faster than myself and a child on there. So it is partly a traction thing and of course partly how much weight you have on there. But it is more than capable of riding on grassy surfaces, and I never felt like the scooter was going to slide out from under me. Even when I was going along and making some fairly sharp turns on the grass, it still did quite well. And of course, something to note, the more uphills you do, the battery of course is going to drain faster. But if you're riding on a very level surface for the most part, I have found that that 15-mile range does hold up. I was able to go 12 to 13 miles on a battery, and the battery wasn't fully finished before I stopped. There was still some power left before I had to recharge it again. So 15 miles seems quite reasonable and accurate. So the K1 does come equipped with a 36 volt, 5.2 amp hour lithium ion battery, and that battery takes about 3 hours to charge from 0 to 100. And the charger, there's a nice little charging port where it hooks in. It's got 3 pins, and there's a little door you open to charge it. And then when you plug it in, the power brick is going to have a red light on it, but when it's done charging, it's going to show as green. So at that point, you can unplug it. I do recommend plugging the charger into the scooter first, and then plugging it into the wall outlet. This is a good recommended order just to make sure you don't damage anything when it comes to the charging. And the battery is removable and does have dual charging methods, which is really nice. So you don't have to charge it with it in the scooter. You can take it out, and you could also have an extra battery. So if you want more range out of this, you could carry an extra battery with you. That way, if your battery runs out, you've got another. Next, let's talk about the maximum load capacity of the K1. So the maximum weight limit on the K1 is about 300 pounds, and this is pretty standard across the Caroma scooter lineup. I looked at some of the others, and that is very common for these types of scooters. And the dual seating system is designed to carry 2 adults simultaneously. So as long as the combined weight of the 2 adults is 300 pounds or less, this scooter should be able to handle that. And so when testing this, the scooter can go faster, as I mentioned before, in the uphills if just one person's on there or if someone is lighter. But on a level surface, it didn't really make a difference with that. And even when I was on there with one of my children at a time, I was still able to climb a hill on the grass with the scooter. And the recommended height range for the scooter is 4 feet 7 inches to 6 feet 3 inches. So it's a pretty standard range there that's going to accommodate most people's heights. As far as weight and portability, the scooter weighs about 65 pounds, and the size of it is very nice. I feel like it's about as small as it could be while still being able to hold 300 pounds and having that range. So I like the design. It sits very low to the ground. It's got the fold-up footrest where you can rest your feet, and they also fold down for the passenger on there as well, which is very nice. And portability, if you needed to put this in a car or a small SUV, it would fit in there. If it's in my smaller SUV, just fine. And of course, based on the size, it's going to easily fit into most apartments or any tight spaces if you need to store it indoors. Which, by the way, I do recommend storing it indoors. It is water resistant, but it's not waterproof. You don't want it to get rained on heavily. But if it gets rained on a little bit while you're riding it, that's not going to be a problem. Anytime you're dealing with a scooter or an e-bike where there's a battery and electronics involved, you don't want them to get wet regularly. And as far as an additional load consideration, the front basket on there can hold up to 39 pounds, but that would count toward the overall 300-pound total. So if you're going to be hauling something in that basket, just keep that in mind. So next, let's talk about some of the design features and comfort of this scooter. So first of all, the scooter does have a front adjustable seat, so you can really dial in the level of that seat and get it how you want it for your height and riding comfort. And I do find the saddle is quite comfortable. It's actually larger and more plush than I would have expected on a scooter for this price. And the rear seat is surprisingly comfortable as well. There's plenty of seating area there for your passenger, and it sits at a good height. Unless someone is really tall, that's going to be a good height back there for your passenger. And the scooter does have 20-inch tires on it. The tires are actually pretty wide for a scooter of this size, so I like that. As I mentioned earlier, the traction was really good on grass, and it was definitely good on a hard surface like a road or concrete. There are absolutely no problems with the traction there. And of course, there are fenders on here, so if you ride through a puddle or a little bit of mud, those fenders are going to catch most or all of that without it splashing you and getting you all wet or muddy. So next, let's talk about some safety and technology features of the K1. First of all, the K1 does have mechanical dual disc brakes, and I find the rotors to actually be quite large for the size of scooter. So I found that the braking is no problem, even when I was on there with my children going downhill. The combination of the front and rear brakes is more than effective, and I had no problem with the stopping distance. In fact, I had to make sure I didn't push the brakes too hard because they are so sensitive and work so well that the stopping distance is very fast. So I definitely recommend getting a feel for those brakes before you get out there with the scooter. Now, as far as lighting and visibility, the K1 does have a front LED headlight, and it's actually quite bright. So it'll definitely get attention when you're out there riding. And there's also a very good reflector placement on here. So those reflectors also make it obvious, even if someone isn't seeing you from the front side. And of course, the scooter does have a bell on it that you can ding, and that bell is pretty standard across e-bikes and scooters, and it's quite loud. It'll definitely get attention. As far as displays and controls, it does have a nice LCD display that is going to show you the battery level remaining, and it's useful to be able to keep track of that battery level that's remaining. But I like it, the LCD is simple, it does what it needs to show. And then the battery also has a separate monitor on it. So there's a button you can push that shows the battery level. That's especially useful if you don't have the battery connected to the bike and the bike powered on. When the bike is powered on, it's going to show you the level on the LCD display. And as far as safety certifications, this scooter is UL 2272 certified. As far as the overall safety features of this scooter, the braking is very responsive. You feel like you're in control of the scooter. You don't feel like you're trying to maneuver something that's trying to do its own thing. And that is a great feeling. It's a great feeling of security, especially if you're in an urban area around a lot of people and vehicles. You feel like you're in control of the scooter at all times. And when it comes to comfort and handling, the front shock absorbers are really nice. especially when I was riding on grass and going over a lot of uneven terrain. It really absorbed the shock nicely. I didn't feel like I needed to stand up on the scooter. That and the plushness of the saddle combined made for a very comfortable ride, even when bumps were involved. And when I was going along at 20 miles per hour, the stability was very nice. It didn't feel like the scooter was going to shake apart. It was very stable and smooth. Even when I hit some bumps at those speeds on the grass, I didn't feel like I was going to get thrown off the scooter. So let's talk about a pros and cons analysis for the Caroma K1. First of all, some of the pros. This does have dual seating capability, which is very nice for a scooter in this price range. The removable battery is also very convenient because that means you can bring along a second battery if you want to, or you can remove it for charging. You don't have to have the whole scooter there when you're charging it. You can charge a battery separately, external from the scooter. And another pro is this scooter, of course, is a great value at $450. The front basket is a nice feature as well. Not all scooters have that front basket, and it is useful if you want to carry some things in there. Of course, the UL 2272 safety certification is also good. Not all scooters have that level of certification, so it's good peace of mind to see that on this scooter. And of course, the scooter does come with a 365-day warranty. Cons with the scooter: you can only get about 15 miles on one battery. That is a con if you have a long commute. However, I do find that that is a good range for a scooter in this price range, but 15 miles can still be limiting depending on what your commute looks like in a day. That 20 mile per hour top speed may feel slow for some users. For me, it's just right. I don't think I would want to be on a scooter like this going any faster just because of the size of it, which is a pro that it is small. But if you want a faster speed than 20 miles per hour, this scooter will not do that. Another con is there is some assembly required, but I don't know if any scooters or e-bikes that come 100% fully assembled. Unless you buy one that's like a store model from a store already, you're probably going to have to do some assembly. But as I mentioned before, it's not hard to assemble, and Caroma does include instructions that are easy to follow step by step. So is the Caroma K1 the perfect scooter for commuters under $500? After testing this out for several weeks in several different use cases, I think this scooter is a great value at $450. So if you're looking for a scooter to do that daily A to B, I recommend the K1. If you live in an urban area and you want to go get groceries with it and you're not getting a lot of groceries at a time, it's perfect for that as well, especially if you want to wear a pack on your back. I've worn a pack on my back while riding this, and the basket and the pack combined have been a perfect combination. So if you'd like to check out the Caroma K1, I've linked to it in the description below. Caroma is frequently running sales, so I encourage you to check if there are any active coupon codes or sales at the time of purchase.